Most people think stability means safety. They see calm markets, functioning governments, and predictable routines, and they assume the system is healthy. History tells a very different story. The most dangerous periods are rarely chaotic ones. They are the periods that look controlled. In 1913, just before World War I, Europe was considered the most stable and advanced civilization on Earth. Trade was global. Currencies were trusted. Empires were confident. Newspapers spoke about a permanent age of peace. Nothing felt fragile. And yet, within 1 year, the entire system shattered. Not because chaos appeared suddenly, but because stability had been artificial. It was being maintained by alliances, debt, imperial promises, and political confidence that could not survive real stress. That pattern repeats. In the late Roman Empire, around the 4th century AD, Rome didn't collapse during its most violent years. It collapsed after decades of apparent order. Taxes were collected, armies were paid, cities still functioned. But underneath, the system had stopped correcting itself. Debasement of currency began quietly under Emperor Nero in 64 AD, when silver coins were reduced in purity to fund state spending. Over the next 2 centuries, emperors continued this practice, not to grow, but to maintain stability. Prices rose, trust declined. The economy didn't explode, it eroded. By the time Rome officially fell in 476 AD, the collapse had already happened internally. What remained was a shell held together by appearances. This is the first rule history teaches. Collapse is not an event. It is a process. And artificial stability is how that process hides. In the 1920s, Germany looked stable again after World War I. By 1927, unemployment was falling, production was rising, and foreign capital flowed in. Newspapers spoke of recovery, but that recovery was built on short-term foreign loans and suppressed financial reality. When confidence broke in 1929, the system didn't bend, it imploded. Hyperinflation had already destroyed trust earlier. In 1923, when the German mark collapsed so badly that workers were paid twice a day and wheelbarrows of cash bought bread. That wasn't chaos appearing suddenly. That was artificial stability snapping. The illusion had simply lasted too long. In the United States, the Great Depression didn't begin with panic. In 1928, markets were calm. Stocks rose steadily. Credit expanded. Federal Reserve officials publicly reassured investors that the economy was sound. The system looked stable. It wasn't. When the correction finally arrived in 1929, it wiped out years of suppressed risk in months. History doesn't punish instability. It punishes systems that suppress instability for too long. That's exactly what we are living through now. Modern systems no longer allow failure to surface naturally. Banks are backstopped. Markets are supported. Losses are absorbed. After the 2008 financial crisis, governments did not allow markets to clear. Instead, they injected trillions in liquidity. In the U.S. alone, the Federal Reserve expanded its balance sheet from under $900 billion in 2007 to over $4.5 trillion by 2015. This wasn't growth. It was stabilization, artificial stabilization. Europe followed the same path. Japan had already been doing it since the early 1990s after its asset bubble collapsed. For over 30 years, Japan suppressed interest rates, supported markets, and maintained stability. And for 30 years, growth stagnated. That's the trade. Artificial stability prevents collapse, but it also prevents renewal, because systems only heal through correction. When correction is blocked, weakness accumulates. This is why modern stability feels tense, because it isn't organic, it's enforced. Markets don't move freely, prices don't reflect risk, money doesn't communicate scarcity. Instead, everything is managed. And management requires constant intervention. That's not stability, that's maintenance, and maintenance is expensive. Artificial stability doesn't just distort economics, it reshapes society. When systems suppress failure, people change their behavior. They stop trusting outcomes. They stop believing effort equals reward. They stop planning long-term. History shows this clearly. In the late Soviet Union during the 1970s and 1980s, the system looked stable. Jobs were guaranteed. Prices were fixed. Institutions functioned. But beneath the surface, productivity collapsed. People pretended to work. The state pretended to pay them. Trust disappeared long before the Soviet Union officially collapsed in 1991. By the time the system fell, belief had already vanished. The collapse was sudden, but the decay was decades old. The same thing happened in Argentina. In the late 1990s, Argentina maintained artificial stability by pegging its currency to the US dollar. Inflation was low, confidence was high. Foreign investment poured in. The system looked fixed, but it was being held together by debt and confidence alone. When belief broke in 2001, the government froze bank accounts overnight. The peso collapsed. Savings were wiped out. Artificial stability didn't soften the collapse, it made it more violent. Because people had been lulled into trust. Artificial stability also changes who bears the cost. In real collapses, institutions fail. In artificial ones, people do. Instead of banks collapsing, currencies weaken. Instead of markets crashing, purchasing power erodes. This is exactly what happened in Britain after World War II. The pound wasn't wiped out overnight. It was slowly devalued across decades. Living standards declined quietly. The empire faded, not through explosion, but through erosion. This is the modern model. Slow loss, quiet adjustment, no announcement. That's why today feels strange. There is no clear crisis, yet life feels harder. Housing becomes unreachable. Savings lose value. Debt becomes permanent. This isn't accidental. It's how artificial stability shifts risk away from the system and onto individuals. History shows the same ending every time. Late-stage stability always breaks trust first. People stop believing narratives. They stop responding to reassurance. They disengage. And once trust goes, control becomes impossible. That's why artificial stability eventually collapses faster than organic systems. Because it has no resilience, only belief. And belief is fragile. The Roman Empire lost belief long before it lost territory. The Soviet Union lost belief long before it lost power. Germany lost belief before hyperinflation destroyed the mark. Every time, the same pattern appears. Calm, management, reassurance, then rupture. Understanding this isn't about fear, it's about clarity. Because clarity changes behavior. People who understand artificial stability don't wait for headlines. They don't expect recovery to restore the past. They don't confuse calm with safety. They prepare mentally. They adjust expectations. They stop being surprised. If you want to keep understanding how systems really fail, not how they pretend to survive, then this channel is for you. Subscribe, not because collapse happens tomorrow, but because history shows that artificial stability always ends the same way. And the people who recognize it early never have to panic when others do. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it, and that's the real advantage.